Think about how you made your last real friend. Not a contact, not a follower, not someone whose name appears in your phone but whose voice you have not heard in 2 years. A real friend, someone you trust completely, someone you would call at 2 in the morning if something went wrong. If you were honest about it, the process was probably slow. It happened over shared experiences, repeated contact, conversations that gradually moved from surface to something deeper. Moments of vulnerability that were met with care rather than judgment. It took time. More time than most modern schedules easily accommodate. Now ask yourself, how many friends like that you actually have? Research by Robin Dunbar at Oxford University has found that the average person in modern industrialized societies maintains around 150 social relationships of varying closeness, but that the innermost circle of genuine mutual trust and emotional support typically contains only around 5 people. 5. After a full lifetime of meeting, connecting, and maintaining contact with hundreds or thousands of individuals, most people have approximately 5 friends they would describe as close enough to rely on in a genuine crisis. Ancient humans had a completely different relationship with friendship. Not because they were kinder or more emotionally gifted, but because the conditions of their lives made deep friendship not a luxury, but a structural necessity. And the way they built those friendships reveals something important about what human connection actually requires, something that modern life has quietly and systematically engineered away. To understand it, you have to start with the group. Early human bands were small, typically between 20 and 50 individuals, sometimes slightly larger, occasionally smaller. This was not an accident or a limitation. It was a social technology. A group small enough that every member knew every other member personally, had shared experiences with them, had seen them under stress, had eaten with them, had slept near them, had watched how they behaved when something went wrong. There were no strangers in this group. There was no one whose character you had not had extensive direct evidence of over months and years of close proximity. This is the social environment the human brain was shaped by. Not a city of millions in which the vast majority of encounters are with people you will never see again. Not a social media feed in which relationships are maintained through brief text exchanges and reaction emojis. A small, stable, face-to-face community in which the same people showed up every day for the entirety of your life. Friendship in this context was built the way everything important was built in prehistoric life, through shared physical experience, through doing things together that mattered. Imagine 2 young men in a hunter-gatherer band, perhaps 15 and 17 years old. They have grown up together, which means they have spent nearly every waking hour of their lives in close proximity. They have competed with each other and cooperated with each other. They have been frightened together, which is one of the fastest known pathways to bonding. They have been on hunting trips that failed and trips that succeeded. They have sat together through long afternoons with nothing to do, which means they have talked at length about everything and nothing. By the time they are adults, each of them knows the other with a depth of familiarity that would take most modern people decades to develop with anyone, if they ever do at all. They know how the other responds to fear. They know what the other finds funny. They know when the other is pretending to be fine when something is wrong, and they know this not because they have been told, but because they have watched it happen dozens of times and learned to read the signs. This kind of knowledge is the foundation of trust. And trust of this quality, built over years of close observation and shared experience, produces a relationship that functions entirely differently from the friendships most modern people navigate. The anthropologist Blaffer Hrdy, whose work on cooperative human behavior has reshaped how researchers think about the evolution of human sociality, argues that humans are uniquely adapted among great apes for what she calls cooperative breeding, the practice of raising children through shared effort distributed across a group rather than through isolated nuclear family units. This means that from the very earliest periods of human evolution, success depended not just on individual competence, but on the quality and reliability of your relationships with others. A woman whose network of close allies was strong enough that others would help feed, protect, and care for her children when she was ill or occupied had a measurably better chance of those children surviving. What this means is that the capacity for deep friendship was not a social luxury that appeared after humans had solved the basic problems of survival. It was woven into the solution to those problems from the very beginning. The ability to form bonds strong enough that another person would genuinely invest in your survival and the survival of your children, not out of obligation or calculation, but out of the kind of deep mutual care that only long shared experience produces, was itself a survival advantage of the first order. Hrdy's research suggests that the human infant's remarkable capacity for engaging the attention and care of adults beyond its own parents, the way babies make eye contact, smile, and respond to the presence of others in ways that trigger caregiving instincts, may have evolved specifically to build these extended care networks. Human infants are, in this sense, friendship-seeking devices from the first days of life, because the number and quality of adults willing to care for them directly determined whether they would survive. This is not a metaphor. It is a survival mechanism. The quality of your friendships was, quite literally, a matter of life and death. And this biological reality shaped the human capacity for friendship over hundreds of thousands of years in ways that are still deeply embedded in the architecture of the social brain. Research in social neuroscience has found that genuine close friendship, the kind characterized by high trust, high mutual investment, and long shared history, activates neural reward pathways in ways that are qualitatively different from more casual social contact. The brain treats these relationships as a distinct category. They are processed differently, remembered differently, and their disruption, through death, distance, or betrayal, produces responses that resemble physical pain in ways that casual social loss does not. Neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman, whose research on the social brain at UCLA has contributed significantly to understanding how deeply social connection is embedded in human neurology, has found that the brain's default activity during rest periods, what it does when not focused on any task, is to rehearse and process social relationships. The brain does not default to problem-solving or planning or abstract thinking. It defaults to thinking about people, about relationships, about the social landscape of its life. This is not a distraction from the brain's real work. According to Lieberman, it is the brain's real work, a continuous background process of maintaining and updating the social knowledge that, for most of human history, determined whether you lived or died. This is why the loss of a close friend hits so differently from losing an acquaintance. Your brain does not treat it as a social inconvenience, it treats it as a threat to survival, because for most of human history, that is exactly what it was. Returning to the ancient camp. Evening is coming. The fire has been built up. The day's food has been shared, and the sharing itself is a social act, one of the primary mechanisms through which relationships are maintained and demonstrated in hunter-gatherer communities. Who shares with whom, in what quantity, with what acknowledgement, says everything about the current state of the social bonds that hold the group together. An older woman sits slightly apart from the main group, tending to something with her hands. A younger woman sits beside her, close but not crowding. They are talking, or not talking, in the easy way that only very old friendship allows. The silence between them is not uncomfortable. It requires no management. They have sat in silence together enough times that the silence itself has become a form of company. This is what deep friendship actually looks like when it has had time to develop properly. Not constant stimulation, not performing closeness, not the anxious work of maintaining relevance in someone's attention across the competing demands of 100 other relationships. Just the settled, undemonstrative ease of two people who know each other well enough that their presence together requires nothing extra. Modern life has made this kind of friendship structurally difficult to build and maintain in ways that are worth taking seriously. The average American moves to a new city or region multiple times in their adult life, severing local relationships each time and beginning again. Work culture increasingly demands availability during the hours when friendship has historically been built. The evenings, the shared meals, the slow, unscheduled time that cannot be compressed into a 30-minute calendar slot between obligations. Digital communication allows the maintenance of a feeling of connection without the conditions that actually build connection: shared physical presence, unpredictable time together, the experience of seeing how someone actually behaves when life is difficult. Psychologist Julianne Holt-Lunstad, whose research on social connection and health outcomes has been cited extensively in public health literature, has found that social isolation and loneliness are associated with health outcomes comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The absence of genuine close friendship is not a lifestyle preference with neutral health consequences. It is a health risk of the first order, one that modern societies are only beginning to take seriously. Your ancient ancestors did not have a word for loneliness in the modern sense, most likely because the conditions of their lives made the chronic version of it essentially impossible. You were surrounded by the same people every day of your life. You did not need to schedule time to maintain those relationships. You were simply always in them. The question this raises is uncomfortable but worth sitting with. If deep friendship requires shared physical time, repeated face-to-face contact, unscheduled presence with the same people across years and through difficulty, how many of the conditions that your life currently provides actually support building it? Your brain is still built for the small band, still built for the kind of friendship that develops when you cannot escape each other, when proximity is constant and shared experience is unavoidable, and trust is built not through declarations, but through the slow accumulation of evidence across hundreds of ordinary days. The technology for deep friendship has not changed. It is still the same brain, still running the same ancient social software, still capable of exactly the kind of connection that kept small groups of human beings alive and functional across hundreds of thousands of years. The conditions that software was designed to run in, however, are much harder to find. And that gap between what the human social brain was built for and what modern life actually provides may be one of the quietest and most significant sources of suffering in the contemporary world. You were not built to have 500 followers. You were built to have 5 people who would not let you fall. And that the difference matters more than most of us have been willing to admit.